The world's memory is written in rust, and the clock has almost run out. We've entrusted 60 years of human history to a medium that is, right now, physically liquefying in its own containers. This isn't a theoretical risk. It's not a distant threat. It is a chemical certainty governed by what archivists call the magnetic clock. Across the globe, millions of reels holding our collective 20th century history are quietly dissolving in the dark. We are rapidly approaching a strict, uncompromising boundary line. Deadline 2025.
Within a matter of months, the large-scale transfer of global archival tape is expected to cease permanently. If the data isn't pulled from these magnetic reels before this threshold is crossed, it's going to be locked forever behind an impenetrable wall of decay. The era of mass analog recovery is closing, shut down by the unavoidable expiration date of the physical materials themselves. At the heart of this collapse is a silent, invisible process known as hydrolysis. You see, most magnetic tapes produced since the 1960s utilize a polyester urethane binder. Think of it as the crucial glue responsible for holding the magnetic oxide, the actual data, to the plastic base film of the tape. But this binder is highly hygroscopic. It literally breathes in moisture from the surrounding air. Over decades of storage, incoming water molecules systematically break down the urethane's chemical bonds, destroying the tape from the inside out. The catastrophic consequence of hydrolysis is a condition called sticky shed syndrome. As the moisture takes its toll, that urethane binder softens. It transforms into a sticky, gummy residue. When an archivist attempts to play one of these melting tapes, the consequences are immediate and they are irreversible. The gummy binder adheres to the playback heads. As the tape turns, it screeches, physically tearing the magnetic oxide right off the plastic backing. The sound, the image, the history, it's violently stripped away, left as permanent debris on the machine. The sheer scale of this physical breakdown is staggering. UNESCO estimates that over 200 million hours of irreplaceable audiovisual content are currently at risk. We're talking about the lost footage of the Apollo missions, the final spoken words of extinct indigenous tribes, the undigitized master recordings of modern music. These unrepeated records sit silently inside data ossuaries, vast, climate-controlled warehouses that have effectively become waiting rooms for expiring media.
The physical indicators of this decay are unmistakable, and honestly, they're likely sitting right now in your own home. Experts place the maximum optimal lifespan of a magnetic videotape at a mere 30 years. That means most tapes on Earth are already far past their design life. The deterioration announces itself physically. You might notice a white, powdery residue coating the edges of the reels, or a sharp, distinct vinegar smell permeating the plastic cases. These aren't just signs of aging. They are the active symptoms of a chemical timer running down to zero.
But the breakdown of the tape itself is really only half of the nightmare. The relentless chemical liquefaction of the physical media is being matched by the mechanical extinction of the hardware built to read it. The entire ecosystem of preservation is collapsing on both fronts. Without the proper machines, even a perfectly preserved reel of tape is nothing more than a plastic paperweight. High-end analog audio and videotape recorders have virtually ceased production. The specialized magnetic heads within these players, the exact components responsible for reading the delicate oxide, only survive about 5,500 hours of friction before they are worn entirely flat. We have entered the era of ghost machines. Archivists are now forced to scavenge secondary markets just to cannibalize spare parts, desperately trying to keep these final playback stations alive long enough to outrun the decay. The mystery deepens when we weigh the tapes that don't simply turn to goo. A more insidious variant of tape failure exists, known as soft binder syndrome. In these specific chemical formulations, the tape doesn't shed its oxide. Instead, the binder undergoes a phase change. The glass transition temperature, the exact thermal point where the binder turns from a smooth state to a rubbery state, drops dangerously below normal room temperature. When a tape suffering from soft binder syndrome is threaded onto one of these ghost machines, the sheer friction of the playback head generates instantaneous heat. This pushes the tape past its compromised glass transition temperature. The binder essentially turns into a high-friction, rubbery break. The result is a high-pitched, stick-slip squeal that violently modulates the audio. This embeds a permanent, unremovable distortion into the resulting digital file. The very act of reading the data permanently corrupts it. To combat the ravages of sticky shed syndrome, archivists rely on a desperate protocol. They literally bake the history. By placing the decaying tapes in specialized incubators set strictly between 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 24 hours, the intense heat temporarily drives the accumulated moisture out of the binder. This harsh thermal intervention forces the molecules back into alignment, temporarily restoring the tape's structural integrity for playback. Yet, this thermal intervention creates the baking paradox. The incubator doesn't cure the tape. It merely grants it a fleeting ghost life. Once removed from the heat, archivists have a highly restricted temporary window of playability, usually lasting between just 1 and 4 weeks. After this brief period, the tape rapidly reabsorbs atmospheric moisture, and the magnetic clock resets, often ticking down even faster than before. Archivists get one single pass to digitize the data before the physical structure fails again. When standard baking protocols are applied to tapes suffering from soft binder syndrome, the results are catastrophic, often ruining the tape entirely. Faced with media that turns to rubber under normal friction, archivists have been forced to pivot away from the oven. They are pioneering drastic, low-temperature interventions, known as the cold playback method, to halt the phase change of the binder. This has led to the refrigerator solution. To bypass a chemical flaw embedded in 1970s tape formulations, restorers modify heavy-duty refrigerators to stabilize at exactly 4 degrees Celsius. They place the entire mechanical tape machine and the reels themselves inside this freezing environment. By digitizing the media in the cold, the binder is artificially kept below its glass transition temperature. It stays glassy and smooth just long enough to be archived. It is a desperate, makeshift solution, using a modified household appliance as the final life support system for 20th century history. The ultimate strategy for survival in the digital age is defined by the acronym LOCKS. Lots of copies, keep stuff safe. Modern preservation relies entirely on endless digital duplication across multiple servers to outrun physical decay. But this modern strategy harbors a fatal, retroactive flaw. You simply cannot digitally copy what has already physically turned to gum. If the data cannot be pulled from the analog reel, it can never enter the digital ecosystem. We are standing on the edge of deadline 2025, watching the physical expiration of an entire century. The silence of the ghost machines will soon be absolute. It leaves us to confront a haunting reality about the nature of our own archives. What happens when we finally realize that our vast collective memory was never permanent at all, but merely a temporary, fragile arrangement of rust and glue, always destined to dissolve back into the earth?